Everyone has a voice, but how do you show that in a still image? And how does that sound and still image become something of any or real value for those you photograph? That's what today's film is all about. As I get older, I get more interested in why things happen, cause and effect. I think I'm getting better at reading people and situations and what makes them tick and how they react to their environment. Shooting weddings may not, for some people, be at the sexiest end of a photographic genre spectrum, but we make our living from really quite dramatic cause and effect every time we rock up at one of these unique events. And I think sometimes we take that for granted. So stick with me on this one. I want to tell you a couple of tales about how I think better sound, or probably just as likely the introduction of sound, can change you and your photographic business. From sadness to a story about a killer shark, I'm going to try and play with your sense of sound over the next few minutes. And if you can, strike that subscribe and bell notification now before you forget, as there'll be a follow-up to this film with a Q&A to build you a modest shopping list of the best sound kit to help your storytelling. Now, it's a story I've told a number of times at workshops and conferences, and I'm really looking forward to one that's coming up in England in Bath, which I'll mention at the end and I'll link to below. This story, well, for some it resonates immediately. For others, it's a slow burner of realization that they could be missing the one sense that has never been associated traditionally with still pictures. In 2011, I'd been photographing weddings for around about 7 years. I thought I had it pretty sorted in terms of my sales conversion, shooting style and post-production. I was shooting up to 80 weddings a year, and with the help of a modest team, things were pretty sweet in terms of formula. In March, though, right at the start of that year, I was visited by a couple who I'd photographed as portrait clients with their little baby daughter a few years previous. I'll never forget that meeting. The couple announced that they were getting wed the next month, and they wanted me to do my thing photographically. But then there was the kicker, the bit that changed my way of thinking. The bride had a particular kind of brain tumour that, as she said in our meeting, will see to me, I won't be able to see to it. All I could think about at that time was their daughter, their little daughter, who in 2011 was about 5. Now, I had children not far off that age. You do the math, as they say. So I offered something that I hadn't done before that wedding. I offered to audio record the day as well as make my still images so that I could produce some kind of supercharged slideshow. They didn't want video, so this was a good way, I thought, to bottle the sound. This slideshow wouldn't just feature music, it wouldn't simply play out a rotation of pictures. It would be a living, a breathing production that in stills and sound would be a total legacy piece. I made it for the couple, of course I did, but really I think I made it for their daughter as a sound and pictures time capsule. The bride gave an emotional speech on that wedding day. It brought the house down, as you could probably imagine. And that sound, those emotions, her speech, and that day will live on through their stills and sounds film with their daughter forever. And for me, I realised for the second time in my life, having started my working life in radio, that sound is a potent force to be reckoned with. This was the day the photo film was born. Now, you can see that film on my website, and the link is below. Here's an interesting fact. Babies hear sound from the outside world at 16 weeks gestation. They can recognise their father's voice, for example, on the day they're born. They hear him long before they can properly focus on him. And sound is the last sense we experience before we shuffle off this mortal coil. I remember being at my mother's bed the day she passed on. The nurse told me constantly, talk to her, remember stuff, reminisce. My wife and I had only just found out we were having our second child, and the news of another little grandson was most certainly one of the last things that I shared with my mum. See, we come into this world blind, but we've already experienced what it sounds like. Sound is a vital component of getting film production right as well. Now, there are two types of sound in film. It's a layered thing. You get what's called diegetic sound and non-diegetic sound. And let me break that down, because if you get it right, your films are going to be all the better for it. Diegetic is the stuff we see in the film itself. This is obviously, right now, it's me speaking to camera. It could be me rustling some keys, and it could be this and this. But the non-diegetic stuff, well, that's often the most powerful. It's the fuel that lights up your imagination. And it's why sound and still pictures can be so powerful together. You're seeing a picture, for sure, a still picture, but it's not telling the whole story. Your mind is dancing with the sound. Non-diegetic sense is also why some people believe that radio can paint better pictures. Now, I know what you're thinking and saying. A picture can paint 1,000 words, can't it, Neil? It's a much-used phrase in photography, and often it's used to explain why still images will never die at the end of the videographer's sword. There are many arguments as to who coined that phrase, but most say it was a man called Fred Barnard, who in 1927 actually ripped it from a Chinese proverb, "One picture is worth 10,000 words," and then he used it in advertising as a way to promote simple graphics above lots of typeset sentences. And he was right, but it was never something that addressed that ancient sense of sound. Think about the call to prayer that, for some, can make grown men weep. The tone your teacher used to use when you were in trouble. For me, the sound of a simple wood pigeon in a glade leading down to a coastside at Studland reminds me of my late parents and the holidays we spent on the south coast. It's actually a sound that I think I can also smell, but that's a whole different chat. Non-diegetic sound in films, they're the bits you can't physically see that makes your hair stand on end, like this. See, the shark in Jaws was a bit of a joke in vision. This is a time before CGI, and Spielberg, he had a problem. People on set were mocking the rubberized shark, and they even named it Bruce after the accountant who said there was no more cash to spend on the film. For some, it just wasn't frightening enough. Remember the catchline to that film?
See it before you go swimming.
For my childhood, that meant only one thing: 2 notes, lower keyboard, E and F. John Williams, the composer for Jaws, John Williams became the shark. There are elements in the film where you don't hear E and F, but you're always on edge waiting for those notes, because the key protagonist will never show without them. There's a part in the movie where 2 lads pretend to be the shark and make some kind of fin that they swim with in order to scare the jingles out of people, but there's no E and F. But then the absence of music, well, that sort of conditions us after a while. And it's just as scary when you don't hear the music because you're kind of expecting it any second. And you get to a scene where you just see beneath the surface swimmers paddling in the water, but when that E sounds, you don't even need the F to know that this spells trouble. Jaws is one of the most harrowing examples of well-executed non-diegetic sound telling. But what about the music? Minor key is often associated with sadness. It can be a powerful tool in your pocket. Melancholic or delicate recall are all associated with the minor key. Again, John Williams' compositions in Schindler's List, such as the main theme for many viewing that film, despite the terrifyingly heartbreaking scenes and story, it's that music that binds the experience. And I'm sure it's no accident that the main running theme for that film is in G minor. Before we go back to voice, think about music a little more. Major key music is often happy, exciting, it's energy. But not always. You can almost weaponize your music to create disharmony. That infamous singing in the rain scene in A Clockwork Orange, a major key song in quite the wrong place, makes for total disharmony in your experience. But then Kubrick was an absolute master of recognizing things like that. So why is sound something, as photographers, we don't think to embrace? Why should it be the domain of the filmmaker only? Our pictures coupled with sound make for this non-diegetic experience with a real and, I think, total potency. On my wedding website, something interesting has happened over the last few years. Not all my couples buy into the photofilm concept. Most actually want to simply buy me as a photographer just for the stills, but nearly all, if asked, would say that hearing a wedding on a website, a photographer's website, somehow interrupted their purchase decision. That doesn't sound very romantic, I know, but let me read this postcard because I think that it actually sums it up really, really well. We booked you not just because we liked your pictures, but for the sound of your photo films. They made us feel what our day could actually be like. It was like we'd been transported there. Now, if you're a portrait photographer, and specifically a day in the lifestyle shooter, have you ever thought to ask a family to read their newborn or young child a book? Imagine the power of recording those words of you reading a book, or maybe a grandparent's voice. If you could still hear a grandparent's voice reading you a book as you grow older, what I would give to hear my mum from when I was, 4 or 5, read me The House at Pooh Corner. See, If I was 15 or 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, I'd say no interest. But as Father Time canters on, we have 1,000 pictures of those we love, but what about how they sounded? See, these are the echoes that fade fastest in our memory. So we should bottle them because they're every bit as precious. What we make as photographers is legacy. Every time you press your shutter button, it's about record, it's about life, it's about that legacy. But the kit, Neil, it's just so expensive. Well, yes, some of it can be. I spent less on my first car than I did on this Neumann microphone that I'm talking into now. But this microphone, this battered old Zoom H2, is all I had when I made that very first photofilm. I hope that's in focus. Good sound quality. Well, that's important. If you can buy one of these, which is a Zoom F1, there are many other flavors available with a lapel. Let me hold it out here. The lapel, if you can get that lapel really close to the subject's mouth by either clipping it to a shirt or a jacket, you can conceal them pretty well as well. This goes, the main part, the F1, the recorder, that goes into a pocket or the jacket. Then, the closer you can get it to your subject's mouth, the better the quality of sound. And that's a subject all of its own. I'm going to make a film about what microphones you can use in your photo filmmaking and filmmaking, what to use for narration, what to use for recording your subjects, how to hide microphones, and then of course the workflow. And the reason I'm mentioning that now is that I want to take a bunch of your questions that you leave below and answer them in order to make that follow-up film. So whether it's about depth, about resonance, about post-production treatment, which microphone perhaps to buy on a budget, whatever, leave your questions below with some context and the follow-up will be guided by you as the conductor. If you're looking at this film in a year's time, the following announcement will have come and gone, but with a few months to go, I want to give a hearty plug to the Fujifilm X Weddings Conference in Bath, in England, on the 13th and 14th of November this year, 2019. It's a chance to meet up with some of the best photographers in the Fujifilm community. And though it's titled X Weddings, the fact it embraces all kinds of genres, you don't have to just shoot Fujifilm, makes it a really good place to meet and chat with other photographers. On the second day, I'm hosting a workshop there, and in that workshop, I want to give you an edge that you may not have considered yet. The gift of understanding sound recording. I want to show you how to record, what to record with, what to do with those recordings. I want to take you on an audio journey, and I want to change your business. I want to give you a voice to go with those fabulous pictures that you make every single day. I want you to become the John Williams to your already existing Steven Spielberg. And just finally, I'll link below, I found a very raw film. It won't be for everyone's taste, but it's about what happens when one 26-year-old girl experiences hearing her dad's and son's voice for the first time in her life. If you haven't subbed yet, please do, and strike that bell with a keystroke so that you get to know about films as soon as they're released. And leave me those questions, of course, about sound below for the follow-up film.